Hey everybody, it's Stove Talk with Matt. This video will be about the difference between a grate stove versus a hearth stove, or stove with a grate for air to come up underneath versus most wood-burning stoves have just fire brick where there is no grate. The air comes from the front. There's very little information about this across all of YouTube, and some of this information simply doesn't even exist. You need to understand the basic factors between the stoves in deciding what is best for you. This is an example of a grate stove. They're also called multi-fuel stoves because you can burn coal or wood or other fuels because air flows very aggressively up through the grate, up from the bottom and ash pan, up through the wood. This is an example of a hearth stove or a wood-only stove where the air comes from the front, sometimes the sides. The wood is laid directly on the bottom of the stove. There's no air that comes up from underneath. There's no grate. It can be laid on iron or on fire brick. Most older wood-burning stoves are hearth stoves. There is no grate in most of these stoves. In this case, the fire brick surrounds the firebox. So we'll do the advantage of each type of stove. In a hearth stove, the air comes in usually through two little round circles the size of a US nickel or a dime. Very small little slits allow the air in, much smaller than you would think. And again, no grate, no air coming up from underneath. The main advantage is the wood burns longer. You're not using as much wood. The real advantage is when you go to bed at night, you load it up, you stoke it up, you burn it hot for 45 minutes or more, then you choke the air down a bit. Most people choke the air down far too soon. We'll talk about that later. You have coals in the morning, so you don't have to start everything over with fire and paper and kindling. You have the coals to just continue for several days. That's the main advantage of a hearth stove. A disadvantage of a hearth stove is smoke. A grate stove where the air comes up from underneath around the wood or whatever fuel is being used always produces a much better combustion, much less smoke. Now, smoke is an issue. Sometimes in some cities around the world, smoke devices are being banned. You don't want to smoke out your neighbors. Somebody could call and complain with, the Al Gore initiatives. If you're seen as a wood burner with smoke, this could be a problem in some European cities. People are generally, for whatever reason, even if you're an environmentalist, or you could just get in trouble. They want as little smoke as possible. A hearth stove produces much more smoke. However, most hearth stoves, when you get them up to maximum temperature, 4 pieces of wood completely raging with full air open, you can get that chimney to almost no smoke. Even in an old one like this where there's no secondary air. A hearth wood stove that has a secondary air tube or two does a great job eliminating smoke as well, but it has to be brought up to full temperature. It has to be burned hot. Again, people really get into trouble where the fire rages up. It's only been going for 15 minutes. Then they try to choke it down, and then it starts smoking like crazy. You really should not choke the air down for it, in my opinion, 45 minutes to an hour or more until it's actually starting to become coals. You should choke the air down. Masonry fireplaces or Russian stoves are almost always grate stoves, 99% of the time. Here it's under construction, of course. The fire brick is the tan or yellow bricks, and the red bricks is regular. It's a box inside of a box. The air, I'll show you the next phase of construction in a moment. Air comes up from underneath very, very aggressively. You can usually burn coal in a grate stove or different types of fuel. The bottom door lets the air in. It's also an ash pit. The top door, you see bricks stacked up. That's just holding something up while this thing's being mortared. If those bricks, those tan bricks are removed, you'd see the grate that we just looked at. These stoves, 99% of the time, are grate stoves. They're not hearth stoves. They have a better combustion, but they're only designed to be burned 2 or 3 times a day. So you do have to restart it 2 or 3 times a day. You have to restart it with paper, kindling, 4 or 5 logs. You burn it super hot, and then the 600, 700, or 800 bricks heat up and radiate heat out for 6, 7, 8, 10 hours even when the stove is off. The bricks hold the heat and they radiate it out. In Russia, they'll burn these typically twice a day, in the morning and at night. Rage them up hard for an hour and a half. Then when they go out, all the bricks hold the heat. There will be a little bit less smoke, but not completely smoke-free, for different reasons, because these are some of these are 1,000 brick beasts. It's hard to get a 1,000 brick beast of thousands and thousands of pounds to go smoke-free, but that's a separate issue. Whenever you have a grate, you won't have coals in the morning. It burns more quickly. You could choke it down all you want. You likely will have to restart the fire each time. I've had both types of stoves. Again, most grate stoves are multi-fuel, wood or coal, or sometimes peat. There are other types of fuels where the air comes up. This is most likely just a wood stove, even though there's a grate. Whenever there's a grate, there's typically an ash pan underneath, which makes it easier to take the ash, clean it out, and then again, combustion is much better quickly. Sometimes these go smoke-free in the first 5 minutes because so much air is coming up surrounding the wood. One disadvantage of a hearth stove like this, where you lay the wood just on fire brick or on iron at the bottom, and the air comes in kind of at the layer of the first piece of wood. Again, the big advantage is, again, you have those coals in the morning, and you can get your kindling started. Just throw some smaller sticks and it'll get going. But if you want to you want to keep these stoves going for more than 3 days, then here's a problem. Kind of along the same vein, you have to then, with a shovel, move your good coals off to, say, the left, and then shovel ash out while the stove is hot, which is very, very messy. Hot ash just goes everywhere in your house. Again, you have to shovel the ash out of these. It's not really a problem when it's cold. It is a problem. I had an electrical outage here for almost 7 days. And the other one was 8 days, but that was in the fall. I didn't have to burn the stove. 7 days in the winter. And at the third day, your good coals get pushed over, and then because your ash will pile up so high, your stove doesn't even work right anymore. Covers the air holes. Shoveling out the ash while it's hot, what a mess. So that advantage of having to wake up in the morning and keeping it going, it's only going to be good for 2 or 3 days. So is it a big deal or not? That bar going across the top, the silver or stainless steel, that's steel. Secondary air inlet. Your primary air would be in the center along the bottom. It looks like there's little holes in the back of this fireboard. Maybe this stove allows the air in the back through those little holes. I don't know this model. The top, the bar of the stainless steel with the holes would be a secondary air. It's placed along the baffle, and it does. You can see as the smoke passes through by those little holes, it will ignite again when your temperatures are up high. You're burning 4 pieces of wood at 1,000+ degrees. The smoke will ignite again, taking the smoke in these models, once it gets going, almost to zero. If you look at somebody's chimney with a proper wood-burning stove, you just see ripples. You see almost or no smoke at all for many hours, just ripples, the heat ripples that would come off asphalt. That's all it should look like. With an old 1970s or 1980 hearth stove with fire brick, with no secondary air, you still can get it close to ripples, but you just have to burn it super hot with the air wide open. With those old stoves without the secondary air, you go to choke it down. Oh, I'm going to go out for 5 hours, so I'll just choke the air all the way down so I have coals when I get back from wherever we're going, the movies. It'll smoke, and this is an issue. Could be an issue for city or town ordinance. You smoke your neighbors out. I've had both types of stoves, and I burn them hot. I have an issue with smoking out my neighbors, just as a courtesy perspective. When I'm burning, you can't even tell, just little ripples. So if I have to restart the fire, so be it. I always burn hot. Also, burning hot, no creosote. You choke that thing down with little air, the creosote starts to build up. And I'll close for 5 minutes or so with this image. Sorry guys, not terribly exciting, but this is really important information for a lot of people. And you really don't You can't find it on YouTube. It's just, and in Russia, you watch these videos in Russian. They debate back and forth, hearth stove versus grate stove. They don't even talk about some of these issues. It's frustrating. Anyway, this again is a grate stove, Grate, of course, or also called multi-fuel. This stove would be marketed. I don't know the exact brand, so I don't really, can't speak for it, but it would probably be marketed saying, hey, you can burn wood or coal or other types of fuels. In some cities in Russia, they burn dung, poop. They burn poop. I'm not joking. I'll make a video on that sometime. So, again, an advantage here is, a grate stove, if you're just using it primarily for wood, it'll light up really quick. That air flowing from underneath in a wood/coal stove, the air comes up real aggressively. It lights fast. It rages up fast. You go outside and look at your chimney in the first few minutes. There's almost no smoke, but all that air coming in, and you can turn the air down, of course, but that air coming from underneath, your wood will be burned up 15% more quickly. It's not that dramatic. If you keep it wide open, of course, it'll be half the time. If you choke your air down a bit, you still get a clean burn. You get a 15% extra wood burn out of a hearth stove. So it lights quickly. Advantages here, and then we'll wrap this up. You could burn a coal. On days it's super cold. There's like a 300 or 400 degree difference in coal, anthracite coal, which is called nut coal. 300 or 400 degrees versus wood, and then once you get it going, and it's good for 10 hours, depending on how high your coal stove allows the coal bed to build up. A full bed, you can just with some shakes, you can go 12 hours in advantage of coal. So, what type of fuel you're going to use, and again, most stoves, whether they be used or whatever, are hearth stoves. 90%, 95% are not multi-fuel. They're not great unless you're getting a masonry heater, one with bricks or a Russian stove, or a European counterflow masonry or brick stove like we looked at. Most stoves you buy on, Craigslist or a yard sale or at a store. Iron stoves are hearth stoves, and we talked about the advantage. The best thing to do with a hearth stove is to spend 10 minutes building the fire properly from the start. Lots of twigs, lots of medium-size wood, completely packed, paper, newspaper. Get it set so when you can rage it up very quickly. Get those temperatures up very, very high as quickly as possible, because it takes longer in a hearth stove. And then, then the next 3 or 4 pieces of larger wood, make sure it's very dry. Once you get your temperatures up and the fire bricks, holding 500 degrees each, and then it's easy to maintain. And you go outside and there's very little smoke. It's just harder to get them up to temperature. But anyway, I think I've touched on all the main points. But as I said, in Russia, they love this debate. It goes back and forth. But it's usually, they're saying about a hearth stove for their 600 or 700 brick monster versus a grate stove. And from the perspective of a large 5,000 pound, sometimes 10,000 pound masonry heater, absolutely a grate stove is superior. Absolutely, you rage the temperatures up, super hot, 1,200 degrees, etc. They burn hot for an hour, then all those bricks hold and absorb all the heat and radiate that heat out for 8 to 10 hours. I'm not sure. I don't see the advantage of a hearth stove for a large masonry heater, but that wasn't what was being discussed here. All right, see you next time, guys. Thank you.